That is indeed, Paul. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I think it's good to kind of explain where I was coming from before I started working with you, just to give everyone a bit of context, because it was the BRR strategy. I don't know if you've
Oh no, now we're losing Arshad as well.
heard of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I'm sure a few of the people watching will be familiar with that. So essentially, it was, buying a property below market value, doing a refurb on it, and then putting a tenant in, which is all fantastic and amazing. But I didn't realize at the time that I was actually in a very fortunate economic period that the interest rates were so low. So it didn't really matter what I was doing because there'd be that cash flow at the end. And over the last couple of years, you've seen what's happened to the interest rates as they rise and rise. That's put a real squeeze on the cash flow in the buy-to-let sector. So what was probably a really very profitable business I thought I had, I just seen the margins get lower and lower. And it's one of those ones where that's what kind of prompted me to go, right, is this the best place for me? And as Paul pointed out, if you're in the mire or if you're stuck in, you can't really see the wood for the trees or the path out. And that's when sometimes you need someone to come in and go, yeah, here's where you're going wrong, or let's have a look at this and how we can twist and turn things. And as a result of, almost the first 3 or 4 months working with Paul, we generated £30,000 into my bank account instantly, which was, if I'm being honest, almost as much as I was making from the buy-to-let, so not far off after all expenses. So it just shows you the difference it can make working with the right people there.
Amazing. And so you spoke, about, Paul's obviously spoken about how you've met, etc. Now, taking on a business consultant, one, you've got to make that decision, and then two, choosing that person, because it's going to be an investment in yourself as well. What helped you kind of to make the move on both those areas?
I think the first one is honesty of where you are and where you're going, to kind of go, right, is this it? Is this where I want to be? Now, you've probably seen from me, if something isn't working, I take a step back and go, right, what can I do to take the next step? So when I was the manager at a supermarket, I decided to go back to university, get that extra education and move on. Whereas in business, you don't quite have that same, you can bring in that expertise from externally. And that's what made me think, do you know what? There's something here that I don't quite understand. How can I go to the next level? And having been in the clubhouse rooms with Paul, the respect that he's got, and also the 45 years of business experience, 30 years in property experience, I thought, there's a man I could learn something from.
And I also think for me is a lot of people do a lot of the same stuff. And, as multiple people have said, it's actually great to look at those people who are doing something different, who maybe look at things really differently. And that's what I've learned from Paul, is he'll certainly see things quite differently and be brutally honest, in the nicest possible way. I know there's been a couple of sort of things he said to me that at that moment was quite brutal. But since then, it's been like, wow, that has been really instrumental in, really changing the way that I look at property, I look at business, I look at myself. So yeah, it's tremendously interesting, isn't it, to have that?
Yeah, just like you've kind of pointed out, I think there's that the difference between working with Paul and I've found with others in the past is he doesn't actually tell you what to do. I don't know if you found that. It's more kind of help you connect the dots, so that way you can go away and implement, rather than always have to, oh, Paul, can you feed me the next line, or what do I do here? He's not very much, it's almost like he's helped me understand and see the bigger picture, but also importantly, help me join the dots between them, rather than just tell me what to do. How did you find it, Emma?
Jerry, can I just say there, and we don't want to get bogged down in the difference between a business consultant and maybe a mentor or a trainer, but I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and I was saying that, you know, one of the things you have to be able to do as a business consultant, and I said it in a kind of humorous style just to kind of get the message across, was this: I quite often have to go into people's business and say, "You've got an ugly baby." And few people actually want to tell people they've got an ugly baby, and even fewer people want to hear they have an ugly baby, right? Yeah. But it's a business consultant's job to go in and spot A, how ugly the baby is, B, tell you that you have an ugly baby, and C, tell you that the baby needs plastic surgery, right? and you know, that's the job, right, of a business consultant. And it's very different, say, for example, to a mentor, because a mentor, we're kind of looking at what a mentor's done, and then we're trying to emulate that. Now, whether we can or whether we can't, it's a big question in mentoring. You know, can I ever really be Emma? You know, we're so different. So I'll always be a poor version of Emma, and Emma would be a poor version of me. Whereas a business consultant, you're not trying to be them. You know, in no way, shape or form is Arshad trying to be me. But he's trying to learn from, you know, the skills that you learn as a business consultant. And one of those skills, and it was really interesting when I looked at Arshad's business, is I said, in business terms, you've got an ugly baby, right? And here's what's ugly about your baby. And here's what we talked about. We talked about his business model. And it's interesting because lots of people are in business right now, today, as we speak, listening to this, hopefully. And they don't know what their business model is. In fact, many of them don't understand they have a business model. And every business has a business model. And the difference is, you know, when you bring a business consultant in, is you decide what the business model is, and then you implement it. Whereas most people have found themselves in a business model that they didn't plan to be in. And why Arshad could take, you know, what he was saying is, you know, I think what he was saying is that £30,000 that he earned in the first few weeks, and the more money that he's went on to earn, right, outweighs what he earned in buy-to-let over a long period of time. Because he didn't really have a business model in the buy-to-let. And when we looked at his business model and we said, well, look, if we just change this and we just change that, because another thing that a kind of business consultant does is they kind of take life like a Rubik's Cube, and they say, look, if we just turn this way, and we just turn this way, and they just turn that way, all the colours are right. But if you've got one section of the Rubik's Cube turned wrong, the whole thing's wrong. And all we did was a simple click, wasn't it? Really, it was a very simple click, Arshad, wasn't it? Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it just all came to light very, very quickly. And
but
we're doing
that. Sorry,
and we're doing that now with the property side of his business. Sorry, your question, Emma.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it often takes, you know, somebody who has that more experience, who has, you know, been there, done it, potentially seen other people do it, and you know, that helicopter look on somebody else. Because even if you're, you know, you might work on your business, you might work in your business, but you don't necessarily know what you don't know. And I was just laughing. Richard has just said, ugly baby. That's what my sister said about me. So that's quite funny. But yeah, I mean, and I think what is really key, and you know, really talk about it a lot, Paul, is that most people in property talk about property and they don't talk about this business. And I know for me, working with you a bit last year, Paul, is this year I feel so much better because I feel I've got a business model. I've got something to follow, and it literally follows, you know, it has a sales marketing department, it has this, it has logistics, it has all of these things, which before in property, I just could not see that. So this is where, for you look at things very much from a business perspective, which it should be. I know that sounds crazy when you say it out loud. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it makes such a difference to be looking at it this way. Okay, well,
and it's that ability, you know, what does a business consultant bring, whether it's myself or an other, right, is we've actually studied business. you know, while we're taking that helicopter view, as you call it, you know, we're looking down on something we understand because we've actually spent a long time studying business. You know, I done my first business study course when I was 18, and I can tell you that's a number of years ago, Emma. And I've done a lot since. You know, I'm currently studying online with Harvard. I'm still studying business at this ripe old age because business is changing all the time. But I think it'd be good, given the time, if we if we talk to Arshad about the deal that he did. I think you signed the paperwork on Friday, if I remember correctly, Arshad, and the counterpart, I think, was signing their paperwork today.
Yes, Paul. You know, it's actually, there's a number of deals that we're doing just now at the moment, but that's probably the one of the ones I'm most excited about. So I think that's a good one to kind of touch on. So there's a commercial property, and the current market value on that property is around 550,000. And as Paul said, we just paid on Friday 300,000. And you know, we're going to do some work on the property, and importantly, it's a commercial to commercial, not a commercial to resi. So I know when we're talking about businesses, one of the things that's really kind of come to the fore for me, and that's working with Paul, is that understanding the average customer value. So here, the average customer value will be roughly £40,000 per annum. And we're going to probably bring in around about 3 customers. So that'll be around £120,000 per year, you know, with all the customers that we're bringing in. And, you know, in the past, I'd kind of talk about rents and percentage returns, but I think that all falls away because when you talk about customer value, that's because we're building a real business. And each of those customers will be bringing in roughly £40,000 per annum. And then we are going to do some work on the property as well. So, you know, it's not just that. And we'll add about £60,000 of value to the bricks and the mortar. And so that, you know, if you add all that up, that'll be probably in excess of £1 million will be the bricks and mortar value. But I'm really excited about the business underneath and the long-term customers.
You said 60,000, and I think you've kind of under the pressure of speaking. You mean 600,000?
Yeah, I think because you know 550 plus 60 doesn't quite add up to $1 million
exactly,
plus, does it?
Yeah, I'd added it up as well and was thinking I got that a bit wrong.
Yeah. So being an actuary, yeah, I've shot myself there.
Yes. So you've got to remember, you know, that Arshad isn't necessarily one of those people who puts as an accountant, a posh accountant. He's not necessarily putting himself forward. You know the old joke about accountants, don't you?
No, come on, tell me.
How do you know when you've met an extrovert accountant?
No idea.
He looks at your shoes. so Arshad isn't used to being kind of in the limelight, and I think he's been quite pressured by it.
Oh,
But he meant 600,000.
Yeah.
And to touch on his point of kind of like customer value, because I think this is one of the things that people don't necessarily understand about commercial property. Do you know, if you've got a buy to let, it doesn't matter whether it's a road sweeper that lives in that or whether it's a major consultant, a doctor, or a brain surgeon. They will pay you roughly the same amount of rent. But with commercial property, you can change the value of the property substantially by bringing in a higher paying tenant. And you say, well, why would one particular business pay more than another? Well, if you take it a location, the location that he's currently got at the moment, it's an engineering company that's in it, but it's a prime location. Now, an engineering company doesn't have to be in a prime location, so they won't pay a prime location rent, if that makes sense. But when that engineering company moves out and it's food retail that's coming in, and when the food retailers come in, they will pay a much larger rent than that engineer would, because they are paying for the footfall, the location of the property. And that's one of the really interesting things about commercial property that Arshad didn't initially understand, that you could have the same property in the same location, but because you've changed the end use and the end user, and that company makes much more money because they're there than the other company would. You know, it doesn't matter where an engineer is, he can only make X. His location doesn't make a great deal of difference. But when you've got a retail outlet, then their location makes a big difference. You know, if you've got a retail outlet in a main location, they will do much better than a secondary location. And this happens to be a main location with what we would class in commercial as a secondary tenant. So that tenant can be moved and will be moved, and Arshad will assist that move and make money, still make money from that tenant. Money will still be made from that tenant, but you bring in a new tenant whose that location suits better, who can make more money in that location and will pay more money for that location. And that's a business model.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. That's something that Arshad, this is the first one that he's done, but he can repeat that. So he can find commercial businesses that are, quote, in the wrong location, help relocate them, and then bring a better business in that will pay a higher rent in the new location. And what's really interesting about that, and this is another thing about kind of value, if you like, in businesses, is that by bringing good quality tenants in there, what we would call blue chip tenants in there, he doesn't only increase the value of the property, but if he was then to sell that as an entity, as a business, he's increased the value of the business.